Hello and welcome to the Perth Gaming Crew Show. My name is Jonathan, and today I'm joined again, as always, by my co-host Johnny. Johnny, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Great to be back. A little bit of a delay, but very happy to be back talking games again, and also awesome to have Ludley back.
Ludley,
Thank
welcome to
you.
the show again. It's always good to have you on. Really excited about today's topic. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah.
Nice haircut too, by the way.
Thank you.
Makes me think a little bit about cyberpunk in a way. Actually, love it.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, we've covered a few topics this year so far, but this year we are finally going to give our Ludley's hands-on impressions of the PS5 Pro. He's taken the plunge. He's picked one up. We're going to cover that towards the back end of the show, just what those experiences are like and what he thinks. For those of you who don't know, Ludley is an ultimate gamer. He's got pretty much every single console, and I have visited his house before, and when I went in there, it was kind of like walking into a spaceship. There was just consoles, amiibo, mecha, anime. It was just like living in another world. It was super cool. So more on that later. Our main topic today is all about graphics in gaming, something that we haven't covered yet because the three of us have played games across multiple generations. And we were having a pretty interesting discussion about what is peak gaming, what games look good enough or what games we think need a remaster or remake in some form. So we've picked a choice collection of games. We might all turn on each other by the end of the show, but so be it. It was a good show while it lasted. Speaking of getting right into the fist fights, Ludley, let's start with you, with your pick that you think is what we call like peak graphics gaming across the console generations.
Yeah, so I was talking about how a little bit underwhelming is the PS5 because one of my peak games is the Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah,
And I played this
Red
one
Dead
on
Redemption
the
2.
Yeah, I played this one on the One X, and the graphic was amazing. It's pretty good. So that's why I keep saying like, what's this new generations for? Like when last generations still have like graphics like this.
So this came out on the Xbox and PS4 generation of
Yeah.
consoles. I'm not quite sure when it came out. It must have been like 2017 maybe, or even before then. Like it's quite old. But why did you pick this game in particular? Like, is it you just think that like graphically it looks like the best a game can possibly look, or is it something about it in particular? Because there's
No,
quite a yeah.
it's more like I wouldn't say nowadays that is like the best graphics, but it holds really strong until now. And was like one of the first games that I try on the One X after they released the updated version of the Xbox One.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at it, I was like, oh wow. And I still, when I play, I was like, oh, that's amazing. Um, it is funny. It is funny. Like this new generation that we are now, that we still call generation, but it's the current generation. The graphics is better, but it's not like, oh my god, so much better than I cannot choose this one. So for me, this is what I say when I say like, oh, this is peak graphic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Red Dead Redemption 2, I think just as like is a graphical showpiece in its own right from that generation. Like the dynamic lighting is incredible. Even when you're like moving around the scenery, you'll see like dust particles drifting around. And this stuff is like, this is the kind of thing people comment on these days. But it's something we saw back in the Xbox One, PS4, and then the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X generation as well with that mid-gen upgrade. But it looks stunning. Like, to me, this is as good as a game needs to get. And I wanted to kind of ask you also about like the facial animations and how the characters look. Like, does this look realistic enough for you, Ludley, in terms of graphical fidelity, or do you need your games to look better, or is this like, no, it's good enough for me?
There's it's get to the point that we can go much further. Like I can see like the new games being like so much higher than that. And I say I buy everything. I have the PS5 Pro. And especially between those two. But we get to this point later. But the graphic, the facial animation is pretty good. Like it still has like some uncanny valley.
Yep.
But the problem is like I don't think we ever gonna be able to jump from that because you still want a little bit of fantasy. Like you don't want to like reality because say like colors and the way things in reality is like a little bit. It's not don't have like that thing
Yeah.
that like a peak graphic can have, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Johnny, what do you think about Red Dead 2, like in terms of peak graphics and just all of it, like from the lighting to the visuals of the
I
facial
just think
animations?
it looks absolutely stunning, and
Mm,
it immerses you in that world so well. Um, yeah, keeping in mind you kind of want gaming to be an escape, so too
mm,
much realism is a bit jarring for me, and
Yeah.
maybe that's that could be because I'm a child of the NES era of graphics, so it doesn't take too much to please me. But no, I think I agree with Ali. It's like you can go overboard with the photorealism in some
mm.
games.
Yeah, no, I'm with you guys there. And I remember like when the first Red Dead came out and then this one came out, and it was like, this is like a huge leap above, but it was enough. I mean, like you are still doing things like you're shooting people in this game, and there it is gory. You don't want it to be ultra realistic. I think that's almost a turn off. I'm completely with you guys. Like I feel like this is peak like graphics in terms of like characters, but even just the environmental detail. Like when I look at this, I don't go, nah, it needs to look a little bit better there, or that mustache is not realistic enough, or I can't wait to see those eyebrows in 4K. Great pick, Ludley. That's absolutely awesome. Johnny, we've got a kind of similar but different pick for you, like when it comes to characters, but it seems like it's around the same era. What's your pick for peak graphics
Yeah, and
across the
look,
generations?
I want to be frank with the viewers from Perth and Beyond that I struggled a bit when the topic came up about modern games because I consider myself more of a retro gamer. I don't play too many modern games, but there is one exception, and that is certainly Arkham Knight from the PS4 generation. That was the reason I bought a PS4 so I could
Oh, okay.
play this game
Wow.
with real good fidelity of graphics. We've talked about this game previously, particularly the story and like character development elements in our Batman special last year. So go back and have a look at that one if you haven't seen that yet, and if you're a fan of the Batman universe. But I don't think when we talked about it, I quite gave the visual polish of this game and its immersiveness and how it brings Gotham City to life quite the justice it deserves,
Hmm.
fully pun intended. Now, this game just brings Gotham City into full life with such vibrancy, as all this attention to detail, like the rain falling on Batman's
Mm.
cape, the facial expressions, the character models probably are just that little bit more expressive than they were in previous Arkham Arkham entries, which probably, although amazing games, just didn't. They were a bit more in the kind of almost like Batman the animated, the sort of animated look
Mm.
art style. This was going for a much more photorealistic art style. But there's just so much about it that is amazing, like how the city lights all come up as you're speeding through the streets of Gotham, apprehending enemies. There's environment changes which are really impressive as different events in the game happen. Like spoilers, the Scarecrow's fear gas is spread across the city, and the sky kind of turns to this like orangey red color. And then there's an interaction with poison ivy that sort of has a kind of effect on it again. So yeah, it's just an amazing game. And this is where I will blow your minds, fellas. This game is almost 10 years old. This is going to be 10 years old in June, which
Yeah.
I can't quite believe. And just because I was so curious, last night I fired up the Switch port of it, and
Oh.
I will tell you, it looked okay. It looked okay. It did the job. It wasn't perfect, like the character
Mm.
models. It struggled not so much with gameplay, but with cutscenes. It seemed to struggle
Mm.
quite a bit. And I do think there was smoke coming out of my 7-year-old Switch at one point, and I had
Not
to
from
do.
Batman's bat pellets or
No,
whatever.
I think running this game was quite a quite a challenge for my aging Switch, which is 7+ years old at this point. But yeah, no, amazing game. In terms of peak graphics, yeah, this is probably one of the few games that I play because of the graphical appeal.
Yeah,
It's funny because
absolutely.
they say that this game is still hold the graphics comparing to this Suicide Squad.
Mm.
They show like the mods of the characters and say like, look how a game like 10 years ago has better graphics than the games made now, you know? Made for the new generation. Made for the new generation.
Yeah, I
So
remember when that comparison came out, and they also did a comparison to Arkham, not Arkham Knights, but Gotham Knights, I think it was, which everyone was really looking forward to, which, got mixed reviews, so be it, but graphically it was also going, oh, where's like the rain effects? Where's all the really dense texture work on buildings and on grounds? Where's the like complex lighting systems? I think like a game like Batman Arkham Knight could release today, and people would be like, that looks incredible. Like that already looks absolutely incredible. And the footage we're seeing here is like a mixture of like cinematics and gameplay, but it's one and the same. Like it does that trick when you start as Batman. It's like, oh, this is how the game looks. Now I'm taking control of Batman. And like the Batmobile, like I have mixed feelings about the Batmobile being in the game. I've only dipped my toes in it. I haven't played it much. Johnny could probably comment a lot more there. But the look of the Batmobile, god damn, like it looks incredible. It looks as good as the car models you'd see in games like the latest Forza. Johnny, I was just going to ask you with this one, because there are the older Batman games, but you mentioned there's a 10-year gap. Like it's been out for 10 years. There'll be gamers who are 13, 14, or now who have never seen the older games. Would you recommend this is the game to jump in, not from a story perspective, but like, in terms of playing the latest and greatest graphically?
Yeah, I definitely would. It wouldn't be one to go past. It's so well put together. It has a really captivating story. I mean, you don't really need to know the story of the previous games to enjoy this, because it's kind of sort of self-contained enough from the previous entries. I love the previous entries. I even like the original Arkham Asylum game. So I picked up the Arkham bundle on Switch, which was heavily discounted. And I actually think the original Arkham Asylum game would probably be a pretty decent run on the Switch. I think it might not be quite the stretch that this one is for the Switch, but so I'm looking forward to checking that out. But yeah, definitely, I would highly recommend it as an entry point into the series, and then you'd probably want to go back and play City and Asylum, and probably Origins too. I think that one doesn't get appreciated as much as it should.
Oh, I love Origins. No, people at Perth and Beyond, check out the Batman games if you haven't. And like Johnny mentioned, we did a Batman special where we cover some of those games more in depth. All right, over to me. So I think like I'm in like the same field as you guys. Like what the hell, Pong? Get the hell out of there! What are you doing? Get out of it! This is my game. All right, Pong. 2 colors is all you need. No, I think like my pick is also right up there with you guys in the sense of like it's of that era of the PS4. Xbox One, and that's where I really felt gaming graphics peaked for me, especially someone who's had like games since NES as well, and PC over the years back in the day. But my pick, in part, is because I love the genre, but I think it's also like a good contrast to the games you guys were discussing, is Dark Souls 3. So Dark Souls 3 came out on the Xbox One, PS4. You can get like a boosted version that runs at 60 FPS, which I've got on my Series X, and I appreciate that because I think this is the kind of game that needs to be played in 60 FPS. But again, when it first came out, I was perfectly happy with how it looked. So this, for those unfamiliar with Dark Souls games, it's not looking for realism in sense of the character models. The character models deliberately look a little bit like toys or dolls, or they just look a bit janky. They certainly don't compare to those games you guys have mentioned. But everything else, like this is like peak, like medieval Gothic environmental storytelling. It absolutely looks gorgeous. Like the effects of the fire in this game, which is a huge theme in the games across the series, looks remarkable. The architecture, like the level of detail, you can just sit there looking at these like cathedrals or looking at like these old tombs and going, wow, just the placement of all the objects. It doesn't look like there's any really reused assets in there. Like even in the starting area, like the Firelink Shrine, which is buried underneath this old like a cemetery. Just even like the gravestones like placed in different areas, and it looks very organic and natural. Like that's how it's happened, and time has worn this area down. I still think like Dark Souls 1 and 2 are still very playable games, but you do see they've shown their age, even the Dark Souls remaster. But I think when we went from the PS3, Xbox 360 era to that next generation, it was more about like the higher graphic fidelity rather than the new bells and whistles. And for me, I just felt like, yeah, Dark Souls 3 looks perfect. Like, even the movement, for example, and the animation of this game of your character and the enemies that you fight, that kind of slow, deliberate. It's almost like a Japanese horror movie the way they move. Very, very strong atmospheric build up due to the animation. Looks wonderful to me. Ludley, did you get across the Dark Souls series, or did you see this one in particular? And what are your thoughts on it?
No, never had a chance. Never had a chance. I want to play the Elder Rings that everybody say.
Yeah.
But from those guys, the one game that I'm playing now is the Armored Core 6.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, I heard that's very good and looks nice too. And
It is really good, yeah.
Oh, cool. Johnny, how about you? Like, I know you're not a Dark Souls fan, but I know you're into like the medieval fantasy stuff. Does the armor look intricate enough for you in this game?
I think visually this game looks amazing. Am I ready for the punishment that is Dark Souls is famous for? That's another question. It's a question for another day, another show, John.
Yeah, no one's ready for that. We'll try to keep level heads on this show. So if you want to enjoy a game for the first 1 minute where you're looking at it, buy Dark Souls, but don't actually play it and just enjoy that first view. You're gonna have to earn your views later in the game. But certainly like an absolute like pick for me. I don't see any need to update this anymore with like god rays or different lighting effects that's already there. And even on the screen, like they're showing like the Boreal Valley, it's just stunning. Like the twilight setting, and then the way like the moonlight reflects across the whole city. Beautiful. Don't touch it from software. Don't touch it, anyone. Just keep selling it on future consoles, please, and I'll buy it. All right, so we've talked about peak graphics and gaming, and it sounds like we're all kind of across the same, like on the same page there. Our next kind of topic is games that we think are a bit janky or really in need of a modern update. And we've got kind of a mix of views on this. So, Ludley, I'm going to start with you because you've got a few words to say about Japanese developed games in particular. Is that right?
Yeah, the thing about we've been talking like graphics is amazing, but sometimes I feel some developers focus too much in graphics and let some things slide. Example is one of the game that I play and like it, but it bothers me a little bit is the Final Fantasy VII remake, because like graphic wise it's really good. The fighting style of the game is good, but I feel limited. I feel like I'm walking a corridor all the time. You know, you don't have too much. Like you can't go much to the sides. And one thing that they do that bother me a lot is the heavy use of invisible walls. You know. So sometimes you look like, oh, I should be able to jump here, and you just can't, you know, like, so it's like, look, there's the smallest thing in the floor ever, you know, so it's like, cool, I'm gonna jump this and go there, you can, and like, it just don't make sense, you know. The guys jump high to do attacks and everything, but they cannot jump like a very small obstacle. And like, I see that most of the Western games now, they don't use anymore invisible walls because it still bothers a lot, you know. It was like, oh, this is it breaks a little bit the realism in the game. Break like you fell out because you're like, look, that's ridiculous, you know.
Yeah, definitely. What I wanted to ask you about with this game, like, do you think, because it does look stunning, like it, you know, the remake was highly applauded. It looks great from like that perspective. Do you, when you look at it, like, does the wall destroy the immersion of the entire game and it make you feel like, oh, these graphics are no longer good enough? Is that the way it makes you kind of feel? Or is it?
I wouldn't say destroy like this part of the graphic. You still look at the game and look like, oh wow, this game is like another level, you know. But it breaks the immersion immediately. Like when you cannot do something that you should be able to do easily, it breaks straight away. It's like, look, if you don't want people to cross here, get something else. Put like a boulder or like a wall, you know. But don't put like something ridiculous that, oh, I cannot jump here, you know. Like it's break immersion. Like, and I think this is the biggest thing that you can do is like when you focus in the game, and you want to do something, and something like that small but that ridiculous happen, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing I want to ask you about this game is like, there's a real difference between Western RPGs and Japanese RPGs, where like the Western ones, like we talked about at the start, go for that realistic look, whereas the
Yeah.
Japanese ones have a mix of like anime look and realism. And for me personally, when I look at these games, I struggle with them a bit because I'm like, oh, they look so over the top, but they're trying to be realistic. Is that a factor or an issue for you, or does this remake itself, apart from the like Invisible War stuff, does it hit the spot? Like, does it kind of do what you want it to do graphically, or do you think that's an issue for you as well?
Look, I wouldn't say bother me much because
Mm.
I used to Japanese things since I was young. Like I'm an anime watcher in this, so
Yeah.
for me it doesn't bother. But it is different. It is different, and
Mm.
I understand your point. You know, some games can be a little bit like, cool, you're gonna be realistic or not? What's your goal here? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like they try to go over the top some points, but it still don't have that immersion that you have by being realistic, because go way a little bit way too artistic. You know, is what I say.
Mm.
You don't want to play a video game to be a reality, but sometimes like you need to have like somehow some consistency. You know, I
Mm.
wouldn't complain much about the Final Fantasy because they are on their universe, like on
Mm.
the realism that they try to get. They're they're set in stone there. You know.
No, definitely, I get that, and it's kind of like the issue you mentioned makes me think about like when someone remakes a game into a modern game, there can be a number of issues that come up that weren't there before. Like you might see like really bad artifacing in the textures or the hair, so it just doesn't look quite right. Or something the animations don't run at a smooth frames per second, and you think, why do they remake it? But it's kind of interesting to hear for you. It's like that technical invisible wall kind of thing. Overall, it's like, yeah, it breaks the immersion, and that's not what you wanted from the remake. Johnny, we're going to go back a little further for your pick, which is a game I've never heard of, and I wish I had because I would have played it back in the day. What did you go with and why?
Yeah, so maybe Ludley, close your eyes, because if you don't like invisible walls, this game from 2010 is gonna upset you. This is actually a really fun action adventure game from the 2010s. It's set in the Tolkien Legendarium. It's called Lord of the Rings: Aragorn's Quest, and it's got a really cool concept. And this is a game I put in the category great concept, but the generation didn't quite have the graphical power to fully deliver on it. Although it did a decent job in its time. So this one I played on the PS3, but it was also, if you can believe it, also available on the Nintendo Wii at the time.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and it's, as I said, it's got a really cool concept. So it's telling the story of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but from the perspective of Aragorn, who starts the story as the kind of lowly ranger from the north, and then eventually becomes the king of Gondor in the Tolkien universe. It's, I think, well, my main reason for thinking it'd be a great time to redo it with modern graphics, get rid of some of the like strange areas that you can't walk into because reasons, and really that was because of limitations, I think, because they couldn't. It's not in any way open world, and not meant to be, but it is immersion breaking, and frustrating because there aren't the visual clues just aren't there a lot of the time, and it's very much like you just learn them from playing it again and again. Okay, I just don't go down that path, that kind of
Mm.
thing. But it's really good, and I think it's great timing to remake it because they're in development. There's a prequel to the Fellowship of the Ring called Hunt for Gollum that's being developed at the moment. It's not due out for a couple of years, but it would be amazing movie tie-in, maybe with some Hunt for Gollum
Mm.
DLC, Aragorn's Quest bundle, in a couple of years, and with using modern graphics just to deliver this great concept with the hardware that can support it in the modern age.
Awesome. Yeah, Johnny, I'm glad you picked this because this is like the quintessential PS3, Xbox 360 era game. I can't believe it's on the Wii. I'd be interested to see what it looks like. But this is the kind of game that when it came out at the time, we thought looked incredible. Like, it's like, oh, I'm on these large battlefields with lots of enemies. Like it wasn't possible on the PS2, for example. and like the translation of like the Lord of the Rings realm into a game that looked this good at the time was incredible. But now, because it's aged so much, you can see the animations, you go, oh gosh. Or you can see the texture work is quite muddy. Or you can see those gameplay mechanics like you and Ludley were talking about, the invisible wall. You just think you can't do that these days. You know, they're just things that we can't tolerate because time has gone by and we've seen modern games do these things really well. Yeah, I think it would make a really good candidate for a remaster. I didn't see this one because I had an Xbox 360, and there's another game you might like called War of the Ring. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's very much like this. Yeah. But what I wanted to ask you about this one is, do you think it would, and you've kind of covered this already, but because we haven't seen these Lord of the Ring games for a long, long time, and we don't know if there's going to be a universe, do you think it would be really popular if it was remastered and brought to like PS5 and all that kind of stuff? Do you think it would sell well?
I think it would, because especially with more big screen adaptations, like they just had an animated War of the Rohirrim, which didn't do well theatrically, but I think when it goes to streaming, it might do a bit better because it's an animated film. And then Hunt for Gollum, which is Andy Serkis is behind this, so I think that's probably going to be quite good because he's Mr. Gollum. So if anyone can hunt Gollum, it'd be him.
And Aragorn, like the whole Aragorn Gollum story is just perfect for that, isn't it?
That's it. So I think it would just be a beautiful game movie kind of parallel thing to have in sort of 2026, 27, I think. Be amazing. But anyone's guess if that ever happens.
Yeah, I know. Licensing issues. Yeah. And there's a huge backlog of old Lord of the Rings kind of titles too across genres. So
Tolkien licensing is so tricky because the license deals are often very prescribed because of what the Tolkien estate will allow you to actually use. They're very strict. So it's always tough.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed, or at least maybe someone will make a modern game that is similar to this and explores the whole trilogy, because I think it's fascinating. You know, who doesn't want to play as Aragorn in like a third-person action party game? So
that's it.
Yeah. All right. So my last pick, and this is a bit of a bomb drop hot topic. It isn't Pong. I'm not bringing Pong back. I don't know how that crept into the system. Get out, Pong.
Photorealistic Pong.
Yeah. 2 colors, 1 bit, 2 bits. I don't know. Yeah. HD Pong. Yeah. 4K Pong is what we need. My pick though, and look, people of Perth and Beyond, you can just fire me in the comments for this because, like, go for it. And I have a different take on this to probably what most people do. So my pick is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So for the record, so this came out in 2017. I have not bought this game and played it all the way through. I've only played bits and pieces of it, like at a friend's house or playing at a demo store like JB Hi-Fi. I've seen a lot of footage and video comparisons. I definitely, when it first came out, and certainly for most of the Switch's life cycle, I thought it was still one of the better looking games. I mean, probably the artistic direction and that kind of like pastel color look is just perfectly suited to the Switch's hardware and the Zelda series in general. However, the Switch 2 is on its way, and sometimes I go and look and think, oh, I'm going to finally buy Breath of the Wild, and I don't because there's another game I want to play instead. And then I go, oh, those textures are looking a little bit flat or basic. Like when you look at some of the footage, the draw distance doesn't look as good as you hoped it did, or it might have looked when it first came out. There'll be quite a bit of pop in, and then the frame rate does stutter in key areas. So for me, like some of those things make it like a really perfect candidate for a remaster, not a remake, but just that remaster where it's like, let's get it at a solid 60 FPS all the way through. Let's put some new lighting effects in there. Let's put some more complex texture work and even more complex geometry, I think, because I think some of the geometry is a bit simple in some areas. And then I think, and this is interesting seeing this footage here for those of you who are watching YouTube, like it reminded me that this was on the Wii U. So almost like a last-gen game that came out as a Switch launch title. And to be fair, like you can still buy it now and it still sells well and it's one of the top sellers and you still have a great time. But for me, this game is just falling into that category now of going, oh, I actually think it would be timely to get a remaster of this game, maybe in the first couple of years of the Switch 2's life cycle. bump up the res, all that, and it'll sell like wildfire. I know both of you will have thoughts on this. Johnny, I'm going to go to you, and hopefully our friendship still hangs in there. What do you think?
Oh yeah, look, it's an interesting idea because I hadn't thought of it like that for sure, because I hadn't really played it much since not too long after it came out. I think I played it in 2019, which is not that long after it had been released. So
No.
I never thought about that, but now that you mention it, like it, maybe I can kind of be convinced why there might be a case for a bit of a touch up. I mean, it's still interesting to me because when you play Tears of the Kingdom, you don't feel like that's a massive graphical update on Breath of the Wild, even though this was a game that was developed effectively for the Wii U and was just held onto until the Switch was ready to launch. But yeah, look, maybe you're onto something, John. I think I might be convinced.
Interesting. We might report back in a year or two when they do release that like deluxe version. You know, we've talked about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but Breath of the Wild Deluxe, who knows? Ludley, what do you think? I know you're quite familiar with Breath of the Wild. What do you think about where it's at and when you played it and whether it needs an update?
I can't say much. I only play 200 hours of this game, you know.
just you just dipped your toes in.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a slight little bit.
You might have climbed a few hills. Yeah.
Actually, there is a rumor that they are making a remake of this one. I don't know if it's gonna be a remake or remaster because they mix their names sometimes, like they did with the Metroid Prime, you know. I hope they do. The rumors say that they're gonna upscale to 4K using the new technology that Nintendo is using now. And I saw some people online that emulate this in the computer and put in the newest graphic cards, running this with like a 4K textures. It's amazing. Like you get in the Zora domain there. They all remade. Like it's so good. It's so good. I don't know if Nintendo gonna get that far. But if they can get something closer to what the fans are doing, it's gonna be amazing. I think maybe they got the idea from seeing like what people can be doing with this game on the emulators. But yeah, Breath of the Wild, like I start playing Tears of the Kingdom. The build mechanic there didn't suit me very well. I would 100% play this game again. Like if they remake the graphic for the Switch, gonna be more 200 hours there. 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the other thing with remasters, remakes, where like you look at the timing of something, and you know we've talked about the Switch 2 lineup before, and we'll talk about it when they do the big reveal in April. But I think like this is almost like an easy win for Nintendo because there'll be so many people who haven't played Breath of the Wild, like both of you, for a while, who'll be like, actually, I'm willing to get back into it, put some shiny new DLC in there with Kirby, or no, not Kirby, but someone in there, maybe the Ice Climbers, I don't know who, put them in there, you know, up-res everything, and you've got yourself a sale to a hardcore Nintendo fan, let alone someone who was 5 years old when the Switch came out and is now 15, 20 when the Switch 2 comes out and is discovering Breath of the Wild for the first time. Yeah, interesting to see what comes of that. But Ludley, we're on to our last topic. So we're talking about our final one before the PS4.
Yep.
PS5 Pro impressions is all about games that just look good forever, evergreen titles in that sense. And I know your pick for this one is a beloved one, so I'm whipping out the footage right now. It's gone straight to the people of Perth and Beyond. Tell us why Megaman X is perfection incarnate.
Look, it is hard. The thing is, everything on the Super Nintendo they just look good. They just look good, you know. Like it's funny because if you go to the Nintendo, like the first one, it's aged. You know, it's all like 2D platform movement, but they do. But not the Super Nintendo. When a game is made well in the Super Nintendo, it stay good. It looks good. You don't. They did a remake. The point that I asked about this game is that they actually made a remake of this for the PSP called Maverick Hunter. You know, I prefer like this. I prefer flat like this. I think the 2D, like there is some companies that like to do this 3D graphics in a 2D platform. You know, if it's not made very well, it's not that great. It's actually is more miss than hit for me. So that's why like this is the comparison for me. You have like Megaman X, they did a remake, didn't sell very well, and I was like, cool, doesn't matter. I'm just gonna play the Super Nintendo again.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny, this like you're across the Mega Man games. You're a fan. This game is like the quintessential SNES game in terms of its pixel art.
They're
How do you feel about this?
Super Nintendo games just look beautiful, and yeah, and obviously this one is a standout in the Super NES catalog for sure.
Yeah, no. Oh, look, I feel the same. Like I grew up like with the NES before this, and I think like when I look at like the N64, GameCube, all these eras, and then the Nintendo and the Sega before it, like it is the Super Nintendo, and it's these kind of games. It's the side scroller 2D action or platform game that just looks perfect. It looks the best as it is, and I think that's why, not because like that's why we see a lot of like modern games made in this style, not just because there's nostalgia there, but because it's visually very pleasing. Like it's very clear. The gameplay is easy to pick up, but I think it communicates visually to you what you need to see and what you need to know compared to so many other generations, which is no doubt why the SNES Classic sold so well and why the SNES like era is so beloved. Speaking of, we did do an episode on the Super Nintendo and our favorite games, so go back and check that out. But we just can't gush enough about the Super Nintendo on this channel. And speaking of Super Nintendo and game picks, Johnny, what do you got for us?
So I think I'm gonna provide the exception that proves the rule here about the Super Nintendo, and there are a couple of instances where developers, including Nintendo itself, first party developers, have possibly just exceeded the limitations of the Super Nintendo, and it's given you definitely a good game, fun game, but not one that holds up so well visually. And so what I'm obviously referring to 1993 Star Fox, and I take nothing away from it. It was, in terms of its significance and historical significance, is incredible because it was kind of revolutionary in terms of what it was doing, and it utilized famously the Super FX chip to push the limits of the Super Nintendo and do things that hadn't been done. Provide 3D graphics that weren't possible before. But I have to say that it is tough to look at these polygons again many years later. I played it back in the time and back in the day. Played it at a childhood friend's house for many hours on end. But yeah, look, I think it shows that when you do kind of push the boundaries of the Super Nintendo, you don't get that those graphics that just stand the test of time. And definitely no hate for Star Fox. I think it's a great series. I actually really enjoy the Star Fox series. But yeah, the visuals of that original probably could, now with much better 3D graphics, you could, and I think it has in fact been done in later Star Fox entries, can be kind of executed a bit in better terms than was possible back in the Super Nintendo era. So I consider this to be the exception that proves the rule with Super Nintendo games.
Yeah, definitely. Great point. And even just looking at this footage here, it's amazing to see some of the things that are coming up, like the little chat box with Peppy with text is really hard to do. It takes a lot of power to chug.
Yeah.
You can see like the planet in the background that has to stay there with like just bright lights on the horizon. And the frame rate didn't look too terrible in that footage. So like the demand on the SNES is incredible, like you said, Johnny.
What they actually achieved with the hardware and through the Super FX chip is actually incredible. So I take nothing away from it. I think it's amazing. And we've done graphics. Sometime we're going to come back and do sound music.
Yeah,
This game will be there because it's got some of the most rockin' tunes in gaming. But that's for another special.
Yeah, nice. Ludley, I don't know if you're familiar with Star Fox or not, but just comparing that to Mega Man, what do you think? Like this artistic direction and the use of basic polygons, like how do you feel about it seeing this footage compared to Mega Man?
I think that's the problem with every 3D game. Like 3D games can hold very badly. Like it's very hard nowadays, even comparing to like PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, to go back to those games, you know? Like
Hmm.
it's by the time you're like, oh, this is amazing, and now I was like, nope, it's not, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, so it's 3D games, it's age quick, you know? Yeah.
Yep, no, I'm with you there. And I remember like when the PlayStation 1 Classic was launched, a lot of people were just like, oh, this is what it really looked like. Like, it is hard to go back to like these really basic looking objects, with lots of like pixels flying everywhere. It just doesn't look as good. And I certainly don't want to see the N64 remakes. Personally, I mean, like, Mario 64 HD remaster is one thing, but yeah, whole suite of games, I'm not sure. So yeah, my last pick in terms of our graphic discussion, I think is like the perfect new indie game, because I think a lot of indie games hit this sweet spot really well. And this one I think is masterful. It's a bit of a biased pick because it's my favorite indie game of all time. But part of the reason, and a big reason of that, despite the gameplay being amazing, is what it does from artistic perspective. So this is The Messenger.
Ooh.
2D side-scrolling action platformer. It's a bit like Ninja Gaiden. It pulls from a few games from back in the day, but I won't go into the gameplay itself. I've got a website on the article about that if you want to read into it. From a graphical perspective, this game pulls a magic trick where you're playing the whole game in 8-bit, like a Nintendo game, like an NES game. And it looks wonderful. It uses a really basic color palette, and it reflects the games of that era, but looks a bit nicer, still in HD. And then partway through the game, you discover like a magic item which flips like the way the game looks to 16-bit. So you play the whole game between 8 and 16-bit. You go through these portals, as you can see, and the jump is just like revolutionary. It looks absolutely incredible. So for me, this is just like peak like game from back in the day, or a game that's drawn on games from back in the day, to use the 8-bit and 16-bit graphics to show as much as it possibly can. And it doesn't need to look more complex than this. And the real trick for me is also that a lot of NES games, I think they do hold up pretty well, like the original Mario, for example, but a lot of them don't compared to the SNES era, just because they're so basic or they're so limited. But this game pulls it all off. How about you guys? Johnny, I'm going to throw to you. How do you feel about like these modern indie games that we keep seeing, like Celeste, which we talked about the other week, that look amazing, like SNES games?
Yeah, I really dig the retro-inspired games that have been coming out, especially courtesy of great indie developers. So, yeah, more power to them, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, Ludley, like, what do you
Oh,
think? Like,
I agree 100%. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I like this graphics. I like this because they get the limitation of the color, but they don't have the limitation of the hardware anymore. So they do whatever they want, And like with a, it's you have a higher bit count on these ones compared to the TV that you only have 240 pixels. So yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Like it's when somebody are able to do this, it shows how good the guy is on the view.
Absolutely. And look, for those of you interested to see more of those types of games, we've had a recent indie special, but we've had a couple before that. So go check it out. We just love this stuff. Go check it out if you haven't seen that before. All right, so that wraps up our graphic fidelity part of the episode. Johnny might have to duck off at some point.
I will tap out viewers from Perth and Beyond and leave you in the good hands of Jono and Lily.
Awesome. Thanks, Johnny. Catch you next time.
Hey.
Ludley and I are going to power on because we have got to discuss Ludley's impressions of the PS5 Pro. You've bitten the bullet, Ludley. It's interesting. So for those of you who aren't aware, like the PS5 Pro came out last year. Here in Australia, it's about $1,200. Some people love it. Some people hate it. It's clearly selling very well. And I think the disc drive is almost impossible to get unless you're willing to pay $1 million to a scalper. Sony has just like restocked that recently, actually. But Ludley, you've got your hands on one of these beasts, and you had an original PS5, so the show's all yours. Tell me about the PS5 Pro.
That's what I say. The biggest problem that you have with the PS4 Pro now, PS5 Pro, is that if you don't put them side by side, you're like, okay, what's actually the difference here? It's more stable. You can achieve like higher graphics with a better frame rate. Like I was playing Ratchet and Clank, and the graphics
Mm.
that I'm playing now used to be the best graphics on the PS5, but I have the 6 FPS, you know. So
Mm.
yeah, it is better. It is better. You know, you're
Mm.
paying for a better console and you get a better console, but does the difference worth it for most of the people? You know,
Mm.
I'm a little bit more annoying with this thing. So like, I care, but I can see why people don't care much. And I don't think like they did the PS5 Pro to be like a mass seller. You know, I think it's just like
Mm.
some marketing there just to get people seeing the PS5. But no,
Mm.
no, it's like it's what I say before. Like if you're
Mm.
not that much into games, but you want to play, go to the PS5, save a little bit, a couple of $100 for you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you can buy a PS5. So here in Australia, again, the PS5 is, I think it's $800, 700 or 800. That and the Series X are around the same price. So yeah, compare that to like a PS5 Pro, which is 1200. It's a huge difference financially. You mentioned Ratchet and Clank, which was like a visual
Yeah.
showcase when the PS5 came out, and I think most people would agree this is the best or one of the best looking PS5 games. Did you test this on your PS5 Pro? And if
Yeah,
so, what did you think about the difference? Did you feel like, oh, I needed the PS5 Pro for this game, or was the PS5 enough for you?
yeah, it's what I say. Like I finished this game on the PS5 Pro, and I was starting on the PS5, then I moved to the PS5 Pro. Because what I
Mm-hmm.
say, I can play with the better graphics, but with a better frame rate. You know, like so
Mm.
graphic wise, it's almost the same. Apparently, one thing that I hate there now is that there's too much options. Like
Mm.
the reason that I used to buy games in consoles is because it was easy. You put the disc and start playing, you know. But if in time they start make a little bit harder, not harder, but still like, look, you put the disc, but now you cannot play straight away. You need to download the game. You need to install the game. Cool,
Mm.
that's fine. Now you have too much options of graphics that I think, you know. Before it was
Mm.
simple, you know. It was like the best that the console can make. When they released the PS5 Pro, PS4 Pro, they gave option. Okay, you can have like the graphics or you can have like the frame rates, you know. So you could choose. And it's like, okay, cool, choose choice, fine. But
Mm.
nowadays, like you get the PS5 Pro, there's some games that you can tweak everything on the graphic, and it's like, okay, I'm starting getting confused here. What is the best that I can do? You know, the
Mm.
I think that they should simplify a little bit and go back to like, look, best graphics or best frame rate. You know, that's it. You know,
Mm.
so it's just getting complicated. And like, if I want to complicate it, go back to a PC. You know?
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that when we talked about that off air. Like, because my understanding is when the PS5 Pro came out, it's like you don't need to think anymore; it just does it all for you. Like, and that's what I want as a console gamer. Like, if I wanted to tweak the graphics all the time, I'd get a PC, and that's fine. Some people like to do that, and I know some people who have seen the PS5 Pro come out, or even just the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, go, "Well, I'll just get a PC; it's more powerful, and I can tweak it." But it's strange. Like, I think, as a console buyer, to go, all right, here's my new system, but now there's even more options that I have to consider just to play the game. Like, I just want to put in the game and go, this looks amazing. I know, like, another game you had been testing was Hogwarts Legacy,
Yep.
which is probably one of the bigger games, I would say, this generation. Like, it actually looks just incredible. It came out initially with the PS5 and the Xbox Series. It's been ported to Switch, where I can't believe it runs on the Nintendo Switch, but it sells really well on the Nintendo Switch. Now, I bought this on my Series X, and this is not a console war thing. People play wherever they like, that's fine. But I played this on my Series X, and it looks wonderful. Like, I don't see any problems with it at all. Like, I don't see a lack of detail or issues with the frame rate or a need for more complex resolution somewhere. Like, I feel like it plays well. What were your impressions playing Hogwarts Legacy on like the PS5 and the PS5 Pro? Like, what did you think?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like
Mm.
the PS5, when they released, they gave you three options, and
Mm.
you can get the graphic, the performance, or the graphics with the ray tracing.
Yeah.
And you're like, cool, why? Okay, three, okay. But then you move to PS5 and Pro, and same thing. So
Mm.
like I thought they say they would simplify. They say like, oh, you're gonna have like the best graphic with the best frame rate. That's what they sold. So I thought like, cool, I'm gonna have to stop choosing here, but the choice is still there, and you just choose because, um, but this is not on the console itself. It's like on the developers. Developers they
Mm.
decide to like, oh no, let's start keeping up the options. Like, why? Just like make this on the base console, but in the PS5 Pro, you have best of both worlds, you know. But no, they still go like, no, we're gonna make the graphic even better, but compromise the frame rates if you do this, you know.
Mm.
But then usually like when you get the performance, they say, oh, you get the performance, but the graphic is same as the graphic on the PS5 Pro,
Mm.
the PS5, you know. So I want to simplify it. It's like I was trying to discuss this online, and like people has mixed feelings, you know. Some people want like, oh, I want as most options as I can. Other people like,
Mm.
yeah, no, I just want to buy and play, you know.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
even the computer, when I play in the computer, like I try to get a good graphic card, but everything on ultra and don't bother anymore, you know. Don't want to tweet anything else. Yeah.
yeah, no, I get what you mean. Like,
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear that too, because most people
Mm.
want like the optimized game, the game that looks the best. But even that,
Yeah.
some people prefer the graphical options. And look, each to their own. That's fine. But it just sounds like to like your average gamer, if you've got like a PS5 or an Xbox Series X or a high-end PC,
Yeah.
you don't need to get a PS5 Pro. Certainly,
No.
like there's no
Exactly.
like exclusive games for that, and certainly like the games like Spider-Man 2 that would have come out, like that did come out on the PlayStation Pro, look phenomenally good anyway. So yeah, that's our impressions of the PS5 Pro. Thanks for sharing that, Ludley. But we are out of time for this week. So people of Perth and Beyond, hope you really enjoyed our episode. If you agree or disagree with us, go for it in the comments. We'd love to hear your views, and also check out our website. We've got a few new articles up there, perthgamingcrew.com. But Ludley, any final words from you before we wrap up today?
No, not much, but it's I like the part of the indie games that you guys talking, because say the indie games like they can get like they can go to the highest graphic possible, so they go for the most creative things that they can do, you know. One game that I was talking about was Fez.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
oh
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember
you know.
Fez.
Like
Yeah.
you don't go so crazy, keep the limitation of the 2D with the 3D without being 3D, you know. It's yeah.
Oh, Fez, that's a good reminder. I've got to
Yeah.
go back and check that game out again. No, that's awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us on today's show. Always
Thank you
love
guys for
having you
inviting.
on. Really appreciate it. But to the people of Perth and Beyond, that's all we have for this episode. Have a great weekend. And that's us over and out. See you later.